Herzlichen Dank für die Einladung, dieses ECFR-Jahrestreffen heute und morgen zu eröffnen. Es sind besondere Zeiten und daran lässt auch dieses digitale Format keinen Zweifel. Dabei hätten wir Sie gerne hier in Berlin zu Gast gehabt, zumal dies für den ECFR praktisch ein Homecoming gewesen wäre, ein Back to the Roots, denn 2007 wurde er nur wenige Meter von hier im Weltsaal des Auswärtigen Amtes gegründet. Damals blickte mein Vorgänger, der heutige Bundespräsident Frank-Walter Steinmeier, auf die erst wenige Monate zurückliegende deutsche Ratspräsidentschaft zurück. Auch damals war von Krise und Neustart die Rede. Nach 2 negativen Referenden in Frankreich und den Niederlanden und dem Ringen um den Vertrag von Lissabon. Und doch, die Debatten von damals über einen europäischen Außenminister etwa oder über neue Ansätze in der Sicherheits- und Verteidigungspolitik scheinen einer fast glückseligen Vergangenheit zu entspringen, zumindest verglichen mit der Generationenaufgabe, vor der Europa zu Beginn dieser Ratspräsidentschaft steht. Über 100.000 Europäerinnen und Europäer haben in der Covid-19-Pandemie bislang ihr Leben verloren. Die Folgen der wirtschaftlichen Vollbremsung werden uns auf Jahre noch beschäftigen. Und die gesellschaftliche Zerreißprobe, die steht uns womöglich erst bevor. Wer in diesen Zeiten die EU-Ratspräsidentschaft übernimmt, der muss mit hohen Erwartungen rechnen. Das gilt erst recht für Deutschland als bevölkerungsreichster Mitgliedstaat, größte Volkswirtschaft und Land im Herzen der Europäischen Union, das diesem Europa so viel seines politischen und wirtschaftlichen Erfolgs zu verdanken hat. Meine Damen und Herren, wir wollen diesen Erwartungen nicht nur gerecht werden, wir wollen diese beispiellose Krise nutzen, um beispiellose Veränderungen auf den Weg zu bringen in der Europäischen Union. Und diese Veränderungen drehen sich um 2 Begriffe, die so etwas sind wie die Kurzfassung des gesamten deutschen Präsidentschaftsprogramms: Solidarität und Souveränität. Beide sind 2 Seiten derselben Medaille. Denn nur wenn Europa im Inneren solidarisch zusammenhält und noch enger zusammenwächst, wird es seine Werte und Interessen nach außen durchsetzen können. Das galt schon vor der Pandemie, doch das gilt um ein Vielfaches mehr in der Post-Corona-Welt, in der sich der amerikanisch-chinesische Gegensatz weiter zuspitzt und Instabilität an allen Enden der Welt zunimmt. Doch zunächst zur Solidarität. Ich glaube, ich brauche gar nicht viele Worte zu machen, um zu beschreiben, welch ein revolutionärer Fortschritt in den deutsch-französischen Vorschlägen der letzten Tage liegt. Revolutionär nicht nur aufgrund der finanziellen Größenordnung des Wiederaufbauprogramms und der Bereitschaft, über den EU-Haushalt gemeinsam Mittel für Zukunftsinvestitionen zu mobilisieren. Olaf Scholz hat zu Recht von Europas Hamilton-Moment gesprochen. Revolutionär aber auch deshalb, weil wir damit die Fehler der Vergangenheit überwinden können. Ob Euro oder Finanzkrise oder die Auseinandersetzung um Flucht und Migration, sie alle haben die Gräben zwischen unseren Ländern vertieft. Und auch diesmal droht diese Gefahr, wenn jeder versucht, nur sich selbst zu retten und wir so die wirtschaftlichen und fiskalischen Ungleichgewichte weiter vertiefen. Umso wichtiger ist, dass wir unsere nationalen Maßnahmen von Anfang an in ein europäisches Wiederaufbauprogramm einbetten. Und deshalb wird die Einigung darauf, auf einen Zukunftshaushalt für die nächsten 7 Jahre die oberste Priorität unserer Präsidentschaft sein. Mit ihr steht und fällt der Wohlstand Europas in den kommenden Jahrzehnten. Und deshalb kann es auch nicht um reinen Wiederaufbau gehen. Mehr noch, jeder Wiederaufbau ist zum Scheitern verurteilt, wenn Europa nicht gleichzeitig darüber grüner, sozialer, digitaler und innovativer wird. Das muss sich im künftigen Haushalt widerspiegeln. Und dass wir zugleich dafür sorgen müssen, dass diese Mittel nach rechtsstaatlichen Kriterien ausgegeben werden, versteht sich von selbst, wenn wir über Solidarität und Zusammenhalt reden. Und noch etwas anderes ist mir dabei wichtig. Wir bemessen Europas Stärke in dieser Krise nicht allein in Unternehmensgewinnen oder steigenden Aktienkursen. Dieses Mal soll Europas Solidarität spürbar bei den Bürgerinnen und Bürgern ankommen. Mit dem SURE-Programm wollen wir deshalb allen Europäerinnen und Europäern erstmals durch ein Kurzarbeitergeld helfen. Und wir wollen auch hier noch weitergehen. Stichwort Arbeitslosenrückversicherung und gemeinsamer Rahmen für einen Mindestlohn. Meine Damen und Herren, wir würden eine historische Chance vertun, wenn wir diesen europapolitischen Zeitenwechsel nicht auch nutzen würden, um unsere Union dauerhaft zu festigen. Es kann und darf nicht sein, dass in der nächsten Krise wieder ihr Zerfall im Raum steht. So hat es vielleicht auch etwas Gutes, dass das Virus die Defizite im gemeinschaftlichen Handeln schonungslos offengelegt hat. Dass die EU bei einer grenzüberschreitenden Pandemie allenfalls Empfehlungen aussprechen kann, lässt sich kaum jemandem erklären. Unsere digitale Infrastruktur war mit dem unfreiwilligen Digitalisierungsschub der Krise völlig überfordert. Und über Europas Rolle bei der Krisenprävention und im Zivilschutz reden wir seit Jahren, ohne dass wirklich etwas vorangeht. Das wollen wir ändern. Durch bessere Koordinierung, aber wenn nötig auch durch eine Änderung unserer Verträge. Scheuklappen helfen nicht weiter, das gilt auch dabei für uns Deutsche. Natürlich geht es dabei nicht um die Schaffung eines europäischen Superstaates, sondern darum, Europa handlungsfähig zu halten in einer Welt, in der sich die Gewichte rasant verschieben, weg von Europa. Und in der Dinge wie digitale Innovationskraft überlebenswichtig geworden sind. Und damit bin ich bei der europäischen Souveränität. Erst letzte Woche ist in Brüssel wieder über diesen Begriff debattiert worden. Und ich verstehe die Sorgen der Kritiker vor Souveränitätsverlust oder gar vor einer Entkopplung europäischer und amerikanischer Sicherheit. Doch das ist nicht damit gemeint. Für mich bedeutet europäische Souveränität, dass Europa eigenständig handeln kann, entscheiden kann, dass wir unsere Kräfte dort bündeln, wo die Nationalstaaten ihre Gestaltungsmacht in dem Wettstreit der Großmächte längst verloren haben. Wenn Europa heute fast 90% aller Medikamente, die die WHO als essentiell einstuft, aus China oder Indien importiert, dann zeigt das, wo Handlungsbedarf besteht. Und genauso könnte ich 5G, die Speicher- und Informationstechnik, Logistik, Energie oder den Rohstoffsektor nennen. Der erste Schritt muss deshalb eine schonungslose Analyse unserer strategischen Abhängigkeiten sein. Egal ob technologisch, sicherheits-, handels- oder währungspolitisch bedingt. Nehmen wir etwa das transatlantische Verhältnis. Es wird auch unsere Aufgabe als Präsidentschaft sein, dafür zu sorgen, dass Europa auf den Ausgang der US-Wahl vorbereitet ist und rechtzeitig eine konstruktive Agenda entwickelt. Eine Agenda, mit der wir auf eine neue Regierung Biden oder eine zweite Amtsführung Donald Trumps umzugehen wissen. Und unabhängig davon, wie die Wahl im November ausgeht, werden wir uns Gedanken machen, wie wir die Konflikte rund um Europa künftig auch ohne die USA besser eindämmen können. Auch deshalb wollen wir in unserer Präsidentschaft die europäische Friedensfazilität unter Dach und Fach bringen und ein europäisches Kompetenzzentrum für ziviles Krisenmanagement hier in Berlin gründen. Auch gegenüber China ist es unabdingbar, dass Europa mit einer Stimme spricht. Das gilt gerade jetzt bei der Aufarbeitung der Pandemie und angesichts eines immer robusteren chinesischen Vorgehens in Hongkong und in seiner Nachbarschaft. Auch deshalb wollen wir den EU-China-Gipfel so schnell wie möglich nachholen. Mit Team Europe hat Josep Borrell kürzlich sein Ziel einer echten Verschränkung europäischer und nationaler Außen-, Wirtschafts-, Umwelt-, Entwicklungs- und Sicherheitspolitik umschrieben. Und dabei hat er unsere volle Rückendeckung. Denn noch eine Aufgabe wird auf uns zukommen. Die Krise wird mit Wucht den ärmeren Teil der Welt treffen. Er wird Europas Hilfe brauchen, viel Hilfe sogar. Und wenn wir als Demokratien sie nicht leisten, dann werden es andere tun. zu einem Preis, der auf Dauer deutlich höher sein wird, für uns, aber auch für andere. Meine Damen und Herren, es war deshalb ein Glücksfall, wenn gleich auch kein Zufall, dass wir in den letzten Jahren so eng mit dem ECFR am Konzept europäischer Souveränität zusammengearbeitet haben. Herzlichen Dank dafür. Und damit bin ich wieder beim ECFR, der sich bei seiner Gründung 2007 selbst ins Stammbuch geschrieben hat, für eine europäische Öffentlichkeit, für europäische Themen zu sorgen. Und auch hier wollen wir für Impulse sorgen während unserer Präsidentschaft, durch Bürgerkonferenzen und viele Workshops, aber auch durch innovative Ansätze, wie zum Beispiel ein Kunstprojekt mit Olafur Eliasson. Das Ziel ist Partizipation, engerer Austausch zwischen der Zivilgesellschaft und der Politik. Wie wichtig das ist, das hat uns die Corona-Pandemie noch einmal auf beinahe existenzielle Weise deutlich gemacht. Und zwar auch, wenn es um die Verteidigung unserer europäischen Errungenschaften, um unser Europe United geht. Bei allen Chancen für die Europäische Union, aus dieser Krise gestärkt hervorzugehen, sollten wir eines nicht vergessen. Europas Feinde sind nicht verschwunden. Sie sind zurzeit nur deshalb so stumm, weil ihre Ideologien keine Antworten auf die drängendsten Fragen dieser Krise bieten. Populisten sind eben nicht systemrelevant. Aber sie werden versuchen, auch diese Krise zu nutzen, so wie in der Vergangenheit auch. Sie werden uns für unsere Solidarität kritisieren, ohne zu begreifen, dass sie damit unsere Souveränität untergraben. Doch sie haben keine Chance. Keine Chance, wenn wir zeigen, dass Europa mehr ist als ein Haufen zerstrittener, egoistischer Nationalstaaten. Wenn wir glaubhaft zu unseren Werten stehen, wie Rechtsstaatlichkeit und Demokratie. Und wenn wir zwei Begriffe mit Leben füllen, Solidarität und Souveränität. Wenn uns das gelingt, dann wird diese Krise zur Stunde Europas. Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much. Europas Stunde, Europe's hour. I guess you could say that could be the topic for this entire annual council. Thank you very much to Germany's Foreign Minister, Heiko Maas, and a warm welcome to you all from outside Copenhagen. But I put up the wrapped rice talk from Berlin. It's usually there, but it gives you basically the flavor of Berlin, although I'm here in Copenhagen. I wish we could all see each other in Berlin, but obviously that's not possible. My name is Lykke Friis, one of ECFR's co-chairs, and it gives me great pleasure to chair this all-star German sort of panel with parliamentarians coming from the Bundestag, specializing in EU affairs. And by the way, obviously, you are also all German council members. The timing could hardly be any better. On Wednesday, Germany will take over the EU presidency, and later today, Chancellor Angela Merkel will meet with President Macron outside Berlin, Schloss Meseberg. Let me introduce our panel very briefly here. We have Franziska Brantner from Alliance 90, the Greens. We have Alexander Graf Lambsdorff from the FDP. We have Norbert Röttgen from the CDU, who also happens to be my sort of fellow co-chair. And we have Niels Annen from the SPD. A warm welcome to you all. We have agreed that you will also speak for about 5 minutes on your take on the German presidency, obviously also your reaction to the German foreign minister. He mentioned that it could be Europe's moment, but if you read the ECFR study that was published just last week, well, you could argue that, at least judging from the opinion polls, that a lot of Europeans also thought that this was Europe missing in action. So I think that's going to be a very interesting topic for us to discuss. As I said, you'll have 5 minutes each, and being half Danish, half German, I'm sort of quite fond of punctuality, at least when I'm a chair. So I brought my yellow card here so I can make sure that you basically stick to your overall time. Before I give the floor to Franziska Brantner, just a few household rules here in Zoom land. We are on the record, and if you want to ask questions as a council member, you can either do it using the chat function, or you can use the raise your hand function and then ask your question orally. And you can also ask questions sort of using Twitter. Just remember the hashtag ECFR20. Enough of me. Let's start with you, Franziska. Could this still be sort of the hour of Europe, in particular maybe also on climate change? The floor is yours.
Yeah, many thanks. I hope you can hear me well. I'm in the middle of the Reichstag, but the internet connection seems to be particularly bad today.
It's wrapped.
So bear with me. Okay. I hope that we will make this the hour of Europe. As you said, the beginning was weak because the EU has almost no competences when it comes to the health of human beings. The EU has competences when it comes to the health of animals, but not really when it comes to our health. So I believe that this will be one key dimension to address, so that we are in a better position if we get a second wave, or if a new pandemic comes. And especially we must find procedures so that we do not close again borders. I think that was for me a very painful moment when the borders were all closed and people couldn't see each other again, and we got introduced very random criteria of being, for example, married. That was a protection against COVID, but being together a couple for 20 years was not accepted. So I hope that we will never get back to this, because it really destroyed the fabric of what Europe is made of. When it comes to the budget, and Mr. Maas correctly said that this is the number one priority, it must be. I really don't see yet that this money is enough focused on the future. When you look at the legal texts that are the basis for the billions it's going to spend, there is no legal binding obligation to spend it on climate change or on digital or on becoming more resilient. And I think that we really need to make sure that we do invest in the future. So there must be a legal binding criteria in it on how, every second euro should go into climate change, digitalization. And we need to make sure that this money will not harm the climate and environment. So no more funding for fossil fuels and nuclear. So I think we have to make sure that at least no harm will be done, and the best it should be spent in the future. And the last point, when it comes to the budget, I'm worried that there is too much going on directly for member states, 85%, and there are very few European projects as such, like flagship projects, where we can say we use this now and do create a real European energy infrastructure, a real European train infrastructure, a real European digital 5G infrastructure. And I think that we should define those common European projects, use the money to invest in these, so that we will really be better off at the end of the crisis compared to the beginning. And I really hope that the German government will walk the talk. In words, it sounds nice, but especially when it comes to climate and the climate law, the German government has unfortunately lowered its ambition. And I think it really needs to stick high and to aim at achieving a result on the climate law, the European, by the end of this year. So far, a first few remarks.
Excellent, brilliant. And thank you also sort of for sticking to the time, but also putting so much stress on climate change, because that is actually one of the core conclusions of the report that I mentioned, done by ECFR, which says that, well, Europeans have not lost sort of interest in climate change. On the contrary. So thank you for highlighting that as well. We move now to Alexander Graf Lambsdorff from the FDP. What's your take on the German presidency? I've seen a couple of statements from you where you're rather critical of the recovery fund, and also you could say the so-called Hamiltonian moment. So the floor is yours.
Well, we've not been critical of the recovery fund as such, but we have followed very well what the Frugal Four have been saying about the fund, which is, of course, the structure of the fund. And if you look at the details of it, we'll come to it in a moment, you will see that there are some issues that I think need some improvement. But let me talk a little bit about the German presidency from my perspective. I think this is a presidency that will be shaped by the crises that our continent is faced with. And that the first crisis, of course, obviously is the corona crisis. And I totally agree with what Franziska just said. It was extremely painful to see that we closed our borders randomly. Our member states decided to close a border here, close a border there. There didn't seem to be a reasoning as far as infectious events were concerned. It was just a wholesale closure of the borders. There were exceptions. The Dutch and Belgian borders to Germany were never closed. But by and large, this was a very sad moment. And the second, I have to say from a German perspective, but taking a position role, the second very sad event was that the German government prohibited the exportation of medical devices in the beginning of March, when Italy was already headed towards a really serious crisis situation. That led to a chain reaction in which all member states then scrambled for their own measures, scrambled for selfish measures, and essentially let the European Union down. And so I think our answer to this must be what also was suggested by Franziska. We need to get serious about civilian crisis management capabilities, civilian crisis management competences at the European level. Not to replace what needs to be done locally, obviously. You cannot replace a local health office. But we need to have a European Union that is stronger there than it was in the past. What I really regret is that many national politicians pointed their fingers to Brussels, saying, why didn't you do enough? The very same national politicians who for years refused to hand these competences to Brussels now blame Brussels for not having done enough. So I think there's something that needs to be done. The second thing, and I was surprised that Heiko Maas didn't mention it, or maybe I didn't hear it, is of course that we are still faced with the possibility of a British chaotic exit from the single market at the end of December. And that also will have to be addressed during this presidency. I recognize full well that it is, of course, a decision of both sides to find some form of agreement. If the Brits refuse and continue to refuse to seriously engage, it's going to be difficult. But given the sort of the brevity of the time span that we have, I think the German presidency should at least encourage Michel Barnier and his team to strive for some kind of a framework agreement that would allow for some continuation of the free flow of goods and services across the channel. I think that we are, and that's my third point, in the midst of an economic crisis. In the fall, we will see bankruptcies, we will see job losses, we will see social tensions, we will see a massive economic backlash from this COVID pandemic. And that is why we generally considered a pro-business party, but we're really a pro-competition, a pro-economy party. We want to see a presidency that focuses really on the economic revival of the European Union. And that, of course, will have to play out in the budget as well. So, how are the trans-European networks going to be financed? Is the European Research Council going to be financed better than it was in the past? I mean, research, innovation, you can actually do something there. Last time around, and I was in Brussels for the last multi-annual financial framework, it turned out that it all went to agriculture, it all went to cohesion, and for example, Europeans in the digital area were cut down from 10 billion to 1 billion. That's what we do not want to see this time around. My last point is when we talk about the economic revival, we also need to talk about a very stern answer to all those people who now advocate protectionism and a retreat behind national lines when it comes to trade arrangements. And I think it would be helpful, it would be useful, first of all, to see to it that CETA is ratified by all national parliaments so that it can enter into force fully, because the Canadians really are no threat to our civilization, as some people have posited over the last couple of years. And we may also prepare, and there I think Heiko Maas was onto something, we need to prepare for the United States after the elections, either way. And I think to re-enter into some form of negotiation of better trade relations, better investment relations with the United States, I think would be a very helpful thing. Elmar Brok always spoke of TAFTA, the Transatlantic Free Trade Area. We don't want to go sort of, into the discussion about acronyms, but to improve our trading relationship with the United States after the years that we've had under Mr. Trump, I think would be very helpful. And last point, I was very surprised to hear a European Center for Civilian Crisis Management here in Berlin. I'd be very excited to follow these negotiations in Brussels.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And there, I think it was important also that you mentioned the B word, Brexit. I mean, I'm sure that when we originally started this conference, we thought that we thought that Brexit would be the core topic, but unfortunately, well, obviously, COVID-19 has completely overshadowed that topic. But maybe we should call up Jürgen Klopp to see whether he could sort of make sure that Brexit happens in the right way, considering that his popularity both in Germany and in Britain. But now we move to somebody completely different. We move to Norbert Röttgen. The most important thing is courage. Obviously, you already guessed that I'm quoting Konrad Adenauer, the first Chancellor of West Germany. But what kind of courage, Norbert, do we need as Europeans now also look upon world politics? The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for introducing us and mastering this conversation, dear Lykke. Yes, so I will connect to this quote of Konrad Adenauer. The most important thing is courage. And I would say under the yardstick of courage, what France and Germany have proposed, the Recovery Fund, I think is derived from courage, because it is a recognition and appreciation what the historic situation is about. It means to recognize that there is a compelling situation which European member states and also the German-French couple, which has unfortunately not been that active as many have wished within and outside ECFR. But now when the situation was there, when we really had to act, the French president, the German chancellor, the finance ministers, the two countries have responded adequately in an unprecedented way. And it took a bit of courage, of course, to take the decision to say, we are going to sell German voters that we are giving and spending within the European Union 500 billion euros in grants. They will not be repaid by the recipient receiving countries, but it will be grants, because only this is an adequate answer to the nature of the problem. This has never been so before. It is unprecedented because the situation is unprecedented, but the two of us and the European Commission have lived up and stepped up to what the hour and situation demands of us. So I think this really gives good reason for being fairly optimistic about the second half of 2020 and the European development there. I explicitly agree with Franziska that now it has to be, we have to be aware and have to be very alerted that the Recovery Fund is not mainly about and not characterized as a fiscal transfer mechanism, that it is not mainly about money distribution or redistribution, but that at the end of the day, Europe has to become more competitive. The result of this fund has to be a modernization, an economic, ecological, digital modernization of European economies. I share some concerns on that, because when I saw that the European Commission has already distributed the money to different countries, I think the appetite in different countries is there. So there is an expectation now that there is a claim to get, let's say, 80 billion euros and so on. And then we will find, of course, the reform project. I think it should have been the other way around. Countries would have been obliged to present reform and modernization project, and then the money would be there. So I think this is really a hard thing now to make sure that it's not only about money distribution, but that it is about the finance and investment of modernization and reform projects in the different economies. I think this is very, very important. And the third and final point I would like to touch upon is the sovereignty aspect, or the lessons learned beyond the economic recovery response. I think it's also compelling that at least some serious steps which will make a difference are taken also on the field to improve and to enhance, to develop the ability and the determination of the European Union to act beyond its borders, to take our interests in our hands and develop a strategy. The European-China summit will not take place. I think this can be blamed on Corona, but I think the truth is that the relationship has not flourished in recent weeks and months, but that the problems are on the table. And I think we should recognize that there is no national European answer to the relationship, but we have to agree that some strategic steps have to be agreed on the European level. So our relationships to China, also to a broader security contribution to the transatlantic relationship, start with something in the Middle East. Libya is a disaster. So at least some steps which make clear the determination we are going to develop our ability to act beyond our borders for our interests and values have to be taken. And this should also be seen as a measure of success of this German presidency and the next half year.
Danke, Norbert. Almost thought of one of our founding members there, Timothy Garton-Ash, who I think it was last year, gave a talk in Berlin where he referred to, have to look it up now, Weltpolitik, Fähigkeitsverlust, Vermeidungsstrategie. So that is, I think, still part of the challenge. Maybe you can win some special
English translation for that. Yeah.
That, well, we need to develop a strategy so we can actually sort of have sovereignty as Europeans. But I guess you could win almost a special EU version of Scrabbles if you were able sort of to spell that word there. But thank you very much. We'll return to you, obviously, and I'll just remind all of our participants that you can already now use the chat function and also raise the hand function. So please keep your questions coming, because we don't have that much time. So if you could already now start thinking about them. But before that, obviously, we go to our final speaker, Herr Staatsminister Niels Annen. You've heard a couple of now also statements by your colleagues. At least I heard that there was sort of some interest in Brexit. I'm sure that also goes for the participants. And then there was this crisis center in Berlin. Maybe you could say a few words about that. But otherwise, what is your reaction, particularly also your expectations for the German presidency? The floor is yours. Oops, I think I have a sound problem here. Maybe that's just me. Let's just...
Not just you.
One more time, please continue. Yeah, seems like...
Yeah.
Is it German digitalization? Sorry, I'm half German, so I can say that.
Perhaps
it must
simply
be
has to
Huawei. It's Huawei.
Yeah.
We need to send somebody down there from the Frugal Four.
You
Let's
must
see.
unmute, Niels. I think you just have to unmute.
I think so.
Yeah, it's probably that.
The German government is speechless.
No.
Let's just see whether we can...
I can read his words and his lips anyway, so I can translate. I know his thoughts.
Let's just hear the... There is no audio from Niels Annen coming in. No, so maybe we just continue here to make sure, because then hopefully we can get it to work, so we're not wasting our time here. Could I just ask sort of our panelist, again, referring back to the ECFR study? I was quite struck reading the German figures there. At a certain stage, I thought I was actually reading about Denmark and not Germany, because when you look upon the disappointment of the Germans with regards to Europe, but also the expectation that Europe can actually play a role. I mean, Germans apparently seem to think that this do-it-yourself is at least a high percentage of Germans think that that is the way forward. Was I the only one surprised by that? Do we see some changes coming up in German sort of public opinion with regards to EU affairs?
Can I try to answer that very briefly?
Yeah, please do.
Lykke, I think it has to do with what I briefly mentioned in my introductory remarks. We've seen national politicians blaming Brussels for not doing enough in the absence of real competences. If you look at the European Center for Crisis Response, the European Civil Protection Mechanism, they exist, they have been created, but they are way too weak, have not been assigned competences. And then, of course, the finger pointing that takes place, reinforced by a national media landscape, many of whose parts simply do not know that the German relevant ministries have constantly opposed giving these competences to Brussels, will repeat a narrative about a disappointing performance on the part of the European Union. And I think the figures that you see reflect just that. I think that the champion of that line of communication, of that narrative, has been the governor of Bavaria, Markus Söder.
Can I add?
Sure. Franziska, the floor is yours.
I share what Alexander just said, and I would like to add that the German debate, for example, on when it came to masks, of producing enough medical equipment, was very German focused, and I really criticize this because we need to have a European production of critical medical instruments. And we cannot just say we do it now as Germans. What will Luxembourg do? What will other countries do? But the process was German. So now we need a German pandemic, etc. response. And I think that was part of the not even opening up to should not be a European question, and wouldn't we be better if we did it European? And the export ban at the beginning, I very much agree with Alexander there as well, was terrible. It was just the wrong answer. Terrible. And I can tell you, I was sleepless that night because I thought this is the beginning of the end of the internal market. If we do stop exporting to our European partners in a situation of crisis, that's the end. And I'm very glad that von der Leyen at that point went in and said, you have to take that back. But so I think, the good point, it started again when Merkel and Macron made a joint proposal. And I think we have to take this now forward of really showing what we want to do with that money. I'm like, if we have to convince German citizens that this will be well spent on making Europe a better place. And if you can allow me, I also think that part of the debate in Germany was that so much of the first crisis spending of the EU went to Hungary, and Germans really didn't understand this. It was not Italy. It was Hungary that had just, more or less abolished its parliament. And everybody was asking me in my webinars, why is this happening? How is this possible? So I really think that we have to make sure with the next billions to spend that there will be a conditionality of rule of law and democracy, and that this is very clearly linked. And there are only 2 remaining countries, by the way, that have not joined the European prosecutor that will start on the 1st January 2021. It's Hungary and Poland. And I think that we shouldn't give German taxpayers money or any European taxpayer monies into governments that are not willing to let the European prosecutor come in and check on corruption.
So Norbert, basically,
I would not.
Oh, hang on a minute. I'm just going to ask you a question here, and you can also respond the way you wanted to. But
I think it's not justified to be that negative. What we have seen was the national approach in the first weeks, yes, but I would say it was because of the absence of the European Union, and everybody had to learn and to adapt. So I think this was, and then everybody sought protection in their respective nation states. And I do not consider this to be such a negative experience per se and at all. Yes, the nation state was there and could protect and deliver protection. And then, of course, we got aware this is not a situation which can entirely be solved on a national approach, but we need European and we need international cooperation. So I think we have made our learning curve, and the European mindset of German citizens is very much existent and is vivid and is there. So, for example, this unprecedented recovery fund proposal by the German government has an impressive support, enjoys impressive support by the German electorate. This is really astonishing, and it has not turned out to be a real good topic to be exploited by the right-wing populists. So I think it's a very European-oriented mindset, and I'm very sure that Germans want to see the European Union and Europe work more effective and to do more coordination in order to tackle and to respond to international crises, as we have seen 3 of them in the last decade. So I think there is openness. We just have to present a way that we are really going to tackle these challenges, not by exploiting them by national goals, but to really establish effective European mechanisms which will make all the European countries and citizens more resilient to the challenges we have and threats we have experienced, and which are certainly yet to come.
Lykke, can I just jump in there for one moment? Because what Norbert just said is right. The population, by and large, is pro-European. But why on earth does the German foreign minister propose a European Center for Crisis Management in Berlin? Why not Milan? It's not Berlin that was hardest hit. It's not Berlin that needs recovery. We have a strong recovery program nationally because of a sound fiscal position. But if you want to do something in a European way as a crisis response here, support those countries that were harder hit. So this thing should go to Milan or Torino, not Berlin. I think that's an absurd proposal, frankly.
And now I think we can get an answer to that, because I hope that we now have Niels Annen on the line.
Ja, ich höre Sie. Can you hear me now? Is it working?
Yes, we do. Yes, please go ahead. Yeah. And there were just a couple of sort of questions about the Crisis Management Center in Berlin. And I also see here a question from Carlos Kasper. Is the UK-EU exit deal a priority for the German presidency? But great to have you with us. The floor is yours.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Sorry for this, but it seems that 1 of 10 Zoom conferences are encountering some problems, and I guess I'm not the only one having that problem. So I missed small parts of the discussion, but I think the most was able for me to follow. So thank you again very much for having me, and also for my colleagues and waiting in. I think that for the German government, it's indeed very important, and we have been investing a lot in coordinating not only with our European friends, but also with the German parliament, as I think became very obvious from the interventions of my colleagues that this is very important also because we not only have to convince the European public, but we are also, I think, are in a constant effort to keep the German public on board. As my minister already made an introductory statement, I think I don't need to repeat all the points that he already mentioned. Alexander, I'm not quite sure if there's maybe a misunderstanding with that center, because we have been working since a longer time on the idea of having a contribution for crisis prevention and management, and that is not a spontaneous reaction to the health crisis. That is more like a public policy and contribution to the to the European foreign policy aspect. And I believe we also gave some information to this about Parliament, but we can talk about this in length, I'm sure, on another venue. I wanted to make a brief comment, because I think what has been said about the initial response, also some German decisions is quite right. I think the initial reaction towards the COVID-19 crisis, not only in Germany, but also in other countries, not only in Europe, but around the world, showed that national strategies are doomed to fail in dealing with the global phenomenon. But I think it's also important to mention that this mistake has been corrected rather quickly, which is good. And I believe that it has not only been corrected, but that then Germany also showed a huge part and it made a big gesture of solidarity. Not only when it comes now to the discussion about the recovery fund and the measures that we are going to take. By the way, the French president is today here close to Berlin and meeting with the German chancellor to discuss about priorities for the upcoming weeks and months. Now, Germany also showed solidarity on the level of states, for example, and coordinated with the federal government. We received patients from France and Italy, from other countries. We have been very active then and also offering health and services and equipment to other countries, which I think was important for the people affected, but also sent a political message. Sometimes in political communication, as all of us know, it's also important, to produce some of the images to show that we care, that we are working together, especially because there are also some other forces in the world who are very skillful in doing that. I mean, we have been discussing about so-called mask diplomacy. We saw from certain countries sometimes more engagement in public relations than in actually contributing to the global fight of the pandemic. So I think that's also why we need to make a strong effort during our presidency to coordinate our efforts in a better way, but not only in an ad hoc forum, but as a contribution to a stronger cohesion of the policies of the European Union. So it is about solidarity. It is about defending the European project. I personally believe that and I say that in a very humble way, because we also know that here in Germany, the crisis, it's not over. But we saw that some of the instruments that we have created in Germany over the last decades, like the short work program, for example, a strong social welfare state, made it possible to manage the crisis in a way that distinguishes us, for example, from the enormous rise in unemployment rates in countries like the United States and others. So I think it's important to learn something from that experience and to look where we can be better also on a European perspective. The SHURE program is an important aspect of this. But the sovereignty aspect, I think if we have more time and maybe in the Q&A, it's very obvious that we need to deal with more European sovereignty, not only because of the health-related problems that Minister Maas mentioned, but for example, we are having right now a very difficult debate with our American friends, and US Congress just introduced new legislation that would introduce additional extraterritorial sanctions targeting European energy supply and other aspects if we look at the Iran crisis. So we need to talk, and not only talk, but we need to create instruments that make our European policies more sovereign. But if I may add a last thought, with your permission.
A last thought, yes? Otherwise, yeah.
I heard very clearly what Franziska and others were saying. And we take that contribution or that remark towards climate change very seriously, and it's not off the agenda. But I think if we don't concentrate our forces on fighting COVID-19 right now, it also would be completely unrealistic, and we already need to engage in expectation management, because Germany needs to lead in that situation. But we also don't have a blueprint for every problem. So we need the cooperation. We need the member states to go along. So thank you. And excuse me for not being heard before, but I hope that I can join the discussion now.
We heard you loud and clear, and as you indicated, we have all been in a similar situation. I just wanted to make one sort of advertisement. You mentioned solidarity. Go and check the ECFR solidarity tracker, which clearly sort of highlights what various countries have done. And I think one can clearly see confirmation of what you mentioned about Germany, that Germany has been very active on that front. We don't have that much time left here, unfortunately, because as I said, it's punctuality, it's autumn was sign. But I have a couple of questions here, but I remind you that basically we only have about sort of 4 minutes left, so we have to be really, really quick here. But I think the Brexit question is still out there. I think we need sort of just to have one. Maybe I can ask you, Niels, Annen, Staatsminister, to say a few words on that. Then I have a question here from Patricia Sanal, who asks about Germany's perspective on rule of law. I'm now looking at whether I can persuade Franziska maybe to answer that. Will that be? Is there a German consensus to push for it? And do you see a European consensus building up with regards to the overall question of rule of law? And well, I think that's basically it. Otherwise, I think I will be crucified by the organizers if we're not ending on time. So please, Herr Staatsminister, the Brexit question.
No, absolutely. I mean, Heiko did not mention that in his introductory statement. I'm sure there are other aspects that we could have addressed, but we are working with all our energy. We are supporting the Commission right now. There have been bilateral contacts on all levels with our British friend, and of course we are prepared to make a contribution to find a negotiated solution. But I think, as also the Chancellor made very clear in her recent interview, at the end of the day, the conditions are well known to all the participants, and we cannot substitute for a UK decision. So we are focusing on that, and not just now, but for over many, many months. And it is clearly a vital part of our agenda.
Excellent. Franziska, rule of law. We also have an additional question regarding that, basically saying, I mean, will it be linked to budget transfers now also in the ongoing negotiations? The floor is yours.
Thank you. I think in Germany, apart from the far extremes, we do have a consensus that the EU budget and the recovery fund, so both should be tied to the rule of law and democracy. I'm a bit afraid that now managing the North-South divide, we might end up buying support from Hungary and Poland by weakening this conditionality. I hope we will not get there, but that's my fear. So I think in addition to that conditionality, we really should start talking about the European prosecutor. It's only these two countries left, and I think it should be linked. And Niels, if you allow me, I really think it would be wrong to say, here's the recovery from COVID-19 and there is climate. I really think that we have to bring them together. We have to use the funding we now need to make the investments also necessary for the future. And in Germany, this is part of the Konjunkturpaket, and I think it must be part of the European side. We cannot leave it completely open and flexible without any legally binding objective on climate change and digital and European projects. I really think you could use your presidency to push for real European projects that we all know we need: energy infrastructure, digital infrastructure, and transport infrastructure.
Yeah, but Franziska, nobody is putting that in doubt. But you need to prioritize in a situation that we all are confronted with. But I think I can use the seconds that I have left also to just refer you also to what we are planning in our other presidency, because also the presidency in the Security Council is coming up. And you know that we are clearly focusing on the nexus between climate change and security. So by no means that issue is off the table.
Let me be
Excellent.
very precise. Germany could join France in demanding at least 30% for climate and 10% for biodiversity. I would love to see a German-French agreement on that French position.
As you can see, there's also discussion in Germany on European affairs, which is brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you for your excellent sort of introduction. Sorry we didn't have more time, but herzlichen Dank to our all-star panel, Franziska Brantner, Alexander Graf Lambsdorff, Norbert Röttgen, and Niels Annen. And now, stay tuned for a Scandinavian power couple, Margrethe Vestager and Carl Bildt. Thank you very much.